People want to know how Nicholeen Peck homeschools. Well, I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach parenting, good communication, and family relationship building all over the world through the lens of self-government, but I also homeschool. I always have homeschooled my children. I teach at homeschool conferences all over the globe. Some of the biggest ones, like the Great Homeschool Conventions, which are fantastic ones to attend. If you're ever there, come look for me. Anyway, so how do I homeschool? That's what we're going to be talking about now. In this video, I'm going to share a few of my homeschool experiences and some of the principles of education that I hold on to tight as I homeschool my children so that you can better learn how to teach your children and yourself at the same time. I never thought I would be a homeschooler. Honestly, I was probably the least likely person that would choose to be a homeschooler. My dad was a public school teacher and a university professor. So why would I choose to homeschool my children? In fact, I was a student body officer at one point. I edited the school paper. I was on the school TV. I was on the school sports teams and dance teams. I starred in all the plays at the school. Why would I not want to send my children to school? Well, that's probably a conversation for another day, but just to make it short, I will say my children were learning things very quickly in my home, and I knew they were going to be bored at school. By the age of 3, my oldest 2 children were reading, and I knew they probably would be troublemakers at school because they would be so bored if they had to go and learn their colors and letters. It just wouldn't hold their attention, and I actually knew what that felt like because I felt like I was constantly bored in school. So I found out about homeschooling and I thought, this is an idea. Maybe I could try this. Now, at the same time, I was doing treatment foster care for troubled teens who were all between the ages of 12 and 18. And I thought to myself, well, those teens, they have to go to school because they're not mine. They belong to the state and the state is not going to let me homeschool them. So this will be a time throughout the day where I can have time just with my little ones to teach them so that when those teens come home, they need my help with homework and all the other learning that they're going to need. I will be there and ready for them, and my children will have had my undivided attention the entire day. So that was why I started homeschooling, but what it turned into was a whole lot more. I ended up wanting to homeschool to give my children a type of connection to family that they could never get if they were spending their days at the school, and I wanted to give them a type of education that you just can't get anywhere else. But I didn't know that I was going to do all of those things until I started seeing what was happening in my homeschool. So let's talk a little bit about that. I never knew that a family could be so happy. My parents were great parents and they created a really wonderful home environment for us. But me and my siblings fought a lot. I pushed back against my parents a lot because I was strong-willed. I found myself wanting to be with friends instead of being with family most of the time. And even though many people think that's normal, is it really healthy? I reason with you, it might not be. If our families cannot be happy and healthy together as a group, then what is going to happen in our society and the way that we see the family unit in society? We won't see it for the important unit that it is. It literally is the unit that promotes freedom, principle, all the important things for all of society. If we don't make it the strongest unit in society, then we will actually hurt the entirety of society. We'll hurt our religions, our governments, and our social networks if we hurt our families. So I started seeing these homeschoolers around me that I was learning from and what they had in their family dynamics, and I thought, I didn't know that children could be each other's best friends within families. I didn't know that parents and children could communicate in such respectful and beautiful ways. Wow, this picture of family is something I never knew even existed. So I started wanting that. I started wanting to homeschool to create relationships in my home that they couldn't find in other places. And I'll tell you what, it worked. We ended up becoming the happiest family, a happy family that I didn't know was even possible. And my foster children started begging to be homeschooled, even though I wasn't allowed to homeschool them. I tried to bring them into that culture a little bit so that they could have that type of united feeling that my children were getting in our home. So it changed everything for us. In fact, as I speak all over the world places, I always tell people that I never knew a family could be so happy, and that your focus should really be on the family relationships and not on the academic pursuits. Anyone can teach academics, but not anyone. In fact, no one can take the place of the family unit in the heart and in the life of the child. And that really is going to be the foundation and the grounding for that child, far and above academics. You can learn everything K through 12 in 4 years if you love learning. You can go from illiterate to literate in 80 hours as an adult if you want to. So literally you could teach them nothing and they could still learn to read and write when they're 18 if they want to. So not a really big problem there. Also, you need to know that not every day is going to be perfect as a homeschooler. In fact, I told myself early on, okay, we're not going to have every day perfectly checking everything off of the list that I want to. Because I'm not a public schooler, I don't have to do every single thing on the list every day. And guess who taught me that? My dad, who's a public schooler. I told him one time, I said, Dad, I'm not getting everything done every day. And he said, wait a second. I thought the whole point of homeschool was that you don't have to do every single thing every day. I thought the point was you do the things well. You get into the heart of the child so that they become a different type of person, not just go through the stuff. And I went, oh, thanks, Dad. That's right. The point of homeschooling is to get the information through you, not to just get through the information. So I stopped worrying about whether I was going to get everything on the list done every day. And you know what I found was that about 1 in 10 days would be perfect and we would check everything off the list. But all the other days weren't necessarily going to appear perfect on paper, but as long as we kept our priorities straight, they would actually be the perfect days. I've got some freebies for you that are going to help you with your homeschooling, and I'd like to tell you about those. And I want to talk a little bit more about how I schedule my days and some of my foundational educational philosophies. But before I do, click the subscribe button now. What a lot of people don't know is that the not so known secret for homeschool success and relationship success is actually self-government, which is what this channel is all about. Every video on here will help you and your children self-govern yourselves so that your homeschool impact will exponentially increase. So click the subscribe button now, and don't forget that notification bell too, so that you're notified when new videos come out. All right, I promised a freebie for you. So what's the freebie? I actually have a website that a lot of people don't know about. In fact, I just forget to tell people because I'm always telling people about teachingselfgovernment.com, which is my parenting website. But I actually have another website that is called heartofhomeschool.net. So when COVID happened and people started having to homeschool their children when they never thought they would, I thought, you know what, I'm going to give them a little bit of help. And so I created heartofhomeschool.net, and I did some free events, some free conferences, some free classes, all dedicated to doing the best job at homeschooling your children. And I'll tell you what, I don't just talk about curriculums in these classes. I talk about philosophies of education, principles of education, and how to better bond and impact the heart of your child. So if you go to heartofhomeschool.net, you actually will have free content at your fingertips. So you're going to want to make sure that you definitely find yourself at heartofhomeschool.net. But before you go there, let's be sure to talk about a few of the nuts and bolts that you might not get right off the bat as you get into the information at heartofhomeschool.net. So people always ask me, Nicholeen, what should I do first? I'm just new to this. What should I do? Whether you're new or whether you are a seasoned homeschool veteran, then I have a piece of advice for you. Instead of focusing on which curriculum you're going to pick out of all the stars in the heavens, because there's that many curriculums out there now, instead of focusing on what to teach your children, teach them how they learn. If you focus on how people learn, then you will be able to teach your children how to learn. That is the most important thing that you can ever teach your children, because their learning is up to them. I told my children a long time ago, when they were in their early years of homeschooling, Mommy is going to set up this environment where we learn lots of things, but you have to choose to learn it. I can't make you learn anything. If you want to learn to read, you have to pick to do it. If you want to learn math, you have to pick it. Mom can't make you learn math. I can't make anybody learn anything. So you have to choose it. Your education is on you. It's your responsibility, but I am going to set up the environment where hopefully you will be able to have everything you need to learn all the things you want. So if you ever have a hard time with something, let me know and I'll help you. Or if you ever want to learn something, let me know and I'll make sure that we find a way to learn those things that are important to you. So that's what I talked to them about. And then they knew it was on them. They had to learn what they wanted to learn. If at the end of the homeschool journey, they felt they didn't learn enough, or their friends who went to public school were smarter than them, it was because of them, not because of me. So my job was to set up the environment. Now, who taught me about setting up the environment? Well, there were multiple people I studied. As I was studying how people learn, I found myself studying people like Charlotte Mason and Oliver DeMille, Fenelon, Erickson, Holt. I found myself studying people who had studied education and had come up with how a good education happens. So grateful for people like Benson, Mason, Holt, and DeMille and Fenelon. So especially Oliver DeMille. Now at first I started studying Charlotte Mason. I studied Penny Gardner's book about Charlotte Mason's techniques. I studied Karen Andreola's book about Charlotte Mason's techniques. And I even studied Charlotte Mason. She is amazing. I'll tell you what, that woman knew how people learned. And she was able to set up an environment that was genius for her time back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Incredible learning philosophy there. But Oliver DeMille also studied Mason as well as many others, and he came up with a philosophy and a formula or system for education that really was genius. Now, I love systems. He does not have a curriculum. He has a philosophy and a system. But systems can change the way you see education or the way you see anything, actually. Systems change habits. Now, all of us, if we were educated or matriculated through the public education system or the private education system, we have an idea of what education is supposed to look like. Sometimes we make the mistake of trying to bring that picture into our homes, and actually that picture is not going to fit a home education very well, and it certainly will not open the door to more conversation, because those types of formats of education are meant to be about distributing education at a certain rate and not necessarily opening the door to conversation and discussion, which is really required for what Oliver DeMille called a leadership education. When I read his book called A Thomas Jefferson Education, which is all about creating a leadership education, it truly changed me. I realized this is what I wanted for my children. They needed to know what type of education they were getting, so I would talk to them about a difference between the assembly line or public school education, the more competitive or private school education, and the homeschool or leadership education, which is what I wanted to give them. And I would talk to them about the different phases of the learning that he articulates in his book, A Thomas Jefferson Education, and that I talk about on heartofhomeschool.net, and what phase of education they might be in at that time. In fact, I let them do some assessments a couple of times a year to see if they still agreed with where we were gearing their education toward when they evaluated what phase of learning they were experiencing at that time. I took my time to teach them what learning was going to look like, the phases that they were going to go through of learning, and then we regularly evaluated where they were at and where we would go from here. We also took time weekly to make sure that we had weekly meetings. In my Teaching Self-Government program, which is based on this book here, Parenting a House United, I talk about teaching children self-government or self-mastery skills. One of the things that we do to teach self-mastery is we have regular meetings. So there are 3 different meetings our family has on a regular basis. One of those meetings that the children are part of is called mentor meetings. In their individual mentor meeting that happens every week, we take time to go through their goals and to plan with them how they are going to run their week. So they get the opportunity to make plans for themselves and then follow through with those plans. They check up with me daily and then weekly as we have the more organized meeting on a weekly basis. But I have small meetings with them each day as they go into their independent study time. So let's talk a little bit about how I schedule my day. So let's talk a little bit about the schedule and how I schedule my day. It is important that you have a schedule. That doesn't mean that you'll do everything on the schedule every day. Remember the 1 in 10 days rule that I already talked about earlier. But you do need to have a schedule. This helps you have a direction for where you're going to be headed each day. So in our family, we would wake up, and then my children, after a certain point, opted to do math first thing. They would get out of their beds, grab their math books, come back to their beds, and do math right in their bed before they even got up, while their brain was nice and fresh because they didn't like math that much and they just wanted to get it out of the way. Now, we always did math early in the day anyway, but when they started doing it like that, they accomplished way more math, actually. So I let them do that. Then after math time, they would get up, make their bed, clean their room, do all of their showering, stuff like that. And then we would have breakfast, they would do their chores. And then at 9 o'clock in the morning, which was after I did my chores and my shopping sometimes, as well as my morning exercise, because I started my day early, at 9 o'clock, we would start doing what we called the canon. So what's the family canon? The canon is like in the Bible. The canon of the Bible is what the whole rest of the Bible is measured against. Well, the canon in our family is how we measure our day. In our canon, we would have a family prayer, then we would say our family mission statement, and then we would do our family scripture study and memorizations. We would say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and then we would sing a patriotic song, as well as work on any type of poem or proclamation or something that we were memorizing that week. Then I would have a little bit of time where I would do some mom school, like a little lesson, maybe something out of my studies, a piece of character development, maybe some type of an etiquette lesson, maybe it was a vocabulary lesson or a spelling bee, something that I would do at that time just for them. And then I would start reading to the children. Now, if the children were older, they would go off and do their independent study during that time. But if they were like underage, probably 11 or 12, they would stay there for that reading time with mom. And I would read them all kinds of things. Maybe one week it was all about birds. Maybe another week it was all about airplanes. And then we would be comparing these things. Maybe I would be reading them E.B. White's book, The Trumpet of the Swan. And then we would read about swans, the migration pattern of swans, how swans actually trumpet, and all of those kinds of things. We would also be talking about making money and doing the math lessons that are in that math classic. And so we might be incorporating math lessons into the reading time right there too. By the way, one of my favorite math books for when I'm just starting out math with children is a book called Family Math. It's not the same as a math textbook, but it gives you math activities to do. You don't really need to start using a math textbook until they're a lot older, because so many of the math things we use on a regular basis, you can just incorporate into your regular learning. And I talk about how to do that on heartofhomeschool.net. After I do my learning with the children, we have lunch, and then after lunch, everybody has their independent study time. This is also where mom studies, or if I have a baby, this is when I'm going to be spending a lot of really personal time with the baby, playing with the baby, doing a little mom school with the little toddlers, working with them, doing maybe some of my, prep for dinner, that kind of thing. And then they're going to go off and they're going to study their books, do their projects, maybe art projects, maybe Lego even if they're they're younger, but they're going to also be doing some handwriting practice that I might help them with, all those little things that we want them to learn. And then they have a playtime, and we just end our day with playing and doing fun things together as a family. Now in the evening, Dad's going to read to them a little bit more because Dad's going to be part of this homeschool process. He liked to read biographies and stories of great people's lives to the children, so he would do that in the evenings, and we would play games. No TV. We cut out TV in our family. Now, you don't have to, but we decided it wasted our time. There were too many classics, too many conversations that we wanted to have, and TV got in the way. So we had a family movie night on Friday nights where we would watch TV as a family on that night. And it wasn't really TV, it was a video that we already knew that we approved of. There's so much junk. I like to pre-approve stuff, especially when they're little. Then as they got older, we would bring in other things that we could discuss more of the content from, as we were discussing things in current events as well. As you see, I could go on for a very long time, and I would like to give you more for free. So if you go to theheartofhomeschool.net, you will have tons more information about how I homeschool right at your fingertips. So go to heartofhomeschool.net today. We'll see you there.